When TYT introduced the MD380 in 2015, it set the bar for affordable digital DMR radios and brought many hams and even some small businesses into the digital age. In 2016, the company raised the bar with the MD390, a fully waterproof DMR radio. Then came a dual-band model, the MD-UV390. Now, TYT is doing it again with the introduction of a dual-band digital DMR radio with GPS, IP67 dust and water protection, and 256-bit digital encryption, plus many other features. The MD-UV390 Plus. Joining me to talk about the MD-UV390 Plus is Tanner Balcom. Tanner is a team member at By2Way Radios and is quite familiar with the TYT MD series, including the MD-UV390 Plus. Hi, Tanner. Welcome to the Two-Way Radio Show.
Hey, Rick.
Good to see you here. Glad that you're joining us today. Now, you've spent a lot of time with this MD-UV390, correct?
I have quite a bit. Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of a little, I wouldn't call it a total game changer, but it does raise the bar a little bit with some of the TYT radios. Now, first of all, I just mentioned that we talked about the MD-UV380 and the MD-390 and moved up to the dual band ones. And this one has a few different options to it. I think one of the big things about this, it has 3,000 channels, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a dual bander, 400 to 480 megahertz UHF frequencies and 136 to 174 megahertz VHF frequencies, built-in CTCSS and DCS. This is 5 watts. Now, is it 5 watts on both bands or just 5 watts on the VHF band?
So what my testing on the 3 that I've purchased for myself is it's 5 on both.
Okay, well, that's a good thing because on a lot of the dual banders, you have 4 watts on UHF and 5 watts on VHF. That's kind of standard for a lot of handheld radios. But this one does up to 5 watts on both.
Agreed.
I think that's the way to go. So we've got repeater capability on this, and it has an MB plus 2 digital vocoder on it, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, there's something a little bit different with this one. The other radios had 128-bit digital encryption. This has 256 because for a lot of people, 128-bit encryption is probably pretty decent already because there aren't a lot of systems out there that can break that encryption. It's pretty hardy already. But we're talking 256. What's the big difference here between those?
Your standard typical business entry-level DMR Tier 1, Tier 2 radios are somewhere around like 64-bit or less encryption, if you can get that security on them. Okay. So and those radios are somewhere in the range of 3 times the price of this radio. So that's kind of one of the big differentiators for me is just the encryption level. Set aside the GPS, set aside the screen, set aside the dual band, all the waterproofing, set aside all those special features that we won't even compare yet. Just on encryption alone, you can get twice the amount of encryption at 128-bit for a third of the price, and that's pretty significant. Now, what is different in the 128 versus this 256, obviously, is the amount of character encryptions that it allows. But for what has been explained to me, the new 256 is not a software necessarily encryption. It has a hardware chip that does the encryption, which makes it different than your standard software programmable encryption, like the 128, 64s, and all those. So I think that's what is the game changer for a lot of people. And for me, I have programmed these radios with other 256 Tier 1, Tier 2 DMR radios, and they won't talk to each other because of the hardware encrypted section of it. And so You can still do the standard 128-bit, and they'll work, or 60, and on down that with the tier 1, tier 2 Motorola stuff, and it'll work no problem. But when you get up in the 256, there's really nothing else that'll touch it, and I really like that. It's very, for the price per radio, it's well beyond its capabilities.
And we'll get to the price in just a little bit here, because that is an important point for what you're getting with the encryption.
Mm-hmm.
But let's talk a little bit about who's really going to use this type of encryption for the most part. Obviously, not everybody is going to be concerned so much about the encryption factor here. And this is really more of a digital feature rather than an analog one, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll get to how to unlock the 256-bit encryption in the programming software as we move forward. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Ham radio operators aren't allowed to do the encrypted stuff. So this is more business related. What I see a lot of people using these for are church security teams. They really like them, school security teams, elementary, whatever, on up. A lot of security teams are moving to the digital side away from analog, and then they're also asking and requesting for an encrypted side on their channels. That way, it removes them from your typical person who can listen in, and that makes it really nice.
Let's talk about a couple of other features aside from the digital encryption that are going to be of interest to both the analog and the digital crowd, because this is kind of a hybrid radio. People can use it for analog as well as digital, although most people are going to buy this for the digital features. This radio is cloning capable, of course. You can do text messages with it, private call, group call, all call. You can do a lot of the things that you can do with most other radios of this type. Talk around, channel scan, priority scan. You've got a lone worker mode in here. You've got a lot of pretty standard features. I did a comparison between the full color LCD displays of, say, like the Ocean KGUV-N1, which is also a digital radio, and the MD-UV390. And what I found was pretty interesting. I took both outdoors, and I think one of the complaints about the Ocean radios that have those kind of displays is that they're great displays, beautiful colors. Mm-hmm. The colors are actually a little more robust and brighter and richer than the TYT displays. However, when you get them outdoors, sometimes, particularly in some modes, like if you have it in a darker mode, it kind of gets washed out on the UV-N1, whereas on this TYT display, you can actually see everything. Mm-hmm. It's still there, still pretty robust. Great. So that's one of the things I do like about this radio.
Yeah, and there's a lot of neat features in this radio that once you start getting into the programming side of it, the predecessors it doesn't show up in their software, but in this one they've added things like front keyboard lock, to where if you apply that, you can change the channels and volume, but you can't touch it. None of the keypad works, and that's nice for a business side, so people don't get in and start changing all the settings in and things like that. You can lock it out just to the channels that are selectable by the knob. So there's a lot of neat features like that will show up once you start getting the programming. And for businesses, we build code plugs for them based on these radios if they choose them for their business, and for the frequency that the FCC allotted them. So yeah, it's a neat radio.
So for most businesses, we're going to go ahead and program these for them. When it comes to the hams, that's pretty much their deal.
Agreed.
It's pretty much up to them.
Yeah, a neat feature for these radios, because they're dual band. I worked with an organization who does disaster relief, and they're all over the United States. And one of the neat things for them is we paired them with an FCC license to where they had VHF and UHF frequencies. Depending on the terrain that they were in, they could use either one. And so we got them 4 frequencies for UHF, 4 for VHF. We did digital, we did encryption, And this radio really landed well with them because they could do all the functions and the waterproof ability, and they were able to utilize the UH and VH also. So that was a really nice option for that business.
Let's talk about the waterproof capabilities of this radio just a little bit. This is IP67 waterproof, right?
That's correct.
Which means it's also submersible in up to 3 feet of water for up to 30 minutes. I believe that's how it's rated. Now, these radios are going to be used particularly for businesses. They might be used in a lot of different environments, some pretty harsh weather, a lot of different weather conditions. But how often is someone going to really need something that's totally submersible like that?
Yeah, so what I tell my business customers and who are using these is I tell them it's the rinse off technique. And you get it muddy and you find the nearest stream, you rinse it off and you go on. That's what I usually kind of give them an example of. Yes, they say it's 3 feet IP67, and I just don't like to rinse my electronics deep into a pool of water to test them to see if it's going to work. So I call it the rinse off technique. You get it muddy, you're out hiking with your guys, you're canoeing, camping, backpacking, whatever you're doing. You drop it in mud, rinse it off, you're good to go.
Now, there are also some other handy features in here, I guess. You've got the signal strength indicator there, the high-low power selectivity, and I didn't mention the lighted DTMF keypad. It has a full DTMF keypad, which kind of gets into some of the DTMF and remote features of this radio that are handy to have, because you got stun, kill, revive features that can be utilized using that DTMF keypad. You've got a programmable multifunction key, so you can program it to a number of different things that you want. We've got a timeout timer, keypad lock. We have a clock. I don't know. That's the thing. How often does anybody really use a clock on their radio?
It's a nice feature when you're using it in GPS because it uses the GPS to change the time to where you're at. And so that makes it pretty nice.
Okay, that brings us to the GPS functionality. It does have GPS, but what are we talking about here as far as GPS concerned? Just some basic geolocation or what?
Right, longitude, latitude. It'll give you your elevation. And now when you start, so it took me a while to figure this out and test it through a repeater. So in the closed lab down in the basement with all complete dummy loads, not transmitting on any of the FCC stuff, but I do have a licensed repeater frequency, and I spent a lot of time figuring out how to transmit GPS locations over a repeater. And that was one of the nice things that I ended up figuring out how to do it after a lot of programming and trial and error. But the great thing about these radios, once they're programmed correctly and you're on a repeater, you can send your location to somebody, or you can request somebody else's location, and it'll give that to you on the screen. And then you can either punch it into a computer or your tablet or phone or whatever and figure out their location. It's very accurate. We tested it at work one day, and it put it dead on the money, exactly where the radio was sitting. And so it was very nice. So yeah, the GPS functionality is excellent. It's not real user friendly as far as it doesn't give you a lot of graphics and stuff, but it does give you the basic information if you need it. And why I like the GPS is for customers of mine are like ones that do hiking or trail riding or whatever, and they don't hear from the person that's out in the woods for a while. I can then request their location, and if they fell and then dropped the radio and they're hurt and can't get to the radio, I can find their location based on requesting it, and that makes it really nice. And it's encrypted also.
Well, that can be very important. Yeah. So we have this GPS functionality, and you mentioned AES encryption earlier, but you said something about setting it up in the programming software. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Sure. So it's this quick trick that apparently is not well known. I guess it's because the radio is freshly out. But if you click right here, let's try here, right there in privacy setting,
Uh-huh.
and then you hit Control Shift and P. What'll happen is it'll prompt you some message. You hit OK, and then it'll shut the software down. Reopen the software, and then it'll give you the tab under the privacy setting to do the 256.
So it is a little involved to set this up, but you kind of have to know the trick.
Yeah, you have as soon as you open the software, you do that, and then it'll give you the option for 256 AES. And then programming this is a little different than, say your Motorola. You have to know the different names and how they communicate. Uh, you know, one radio versus another standard. But once you understand how they work, it's really easy to program and get them working.
Great. All right, so now we're coming to a couple other items with the programming here. We're talking about channel import and export, and that's supported in the programming software here, correct?
It is. The channel, also the digital contacts, is also supported. And you can actually import and export the encryption keys too.
Oh, cool. That's handy. And the radio is also preloaded with some popular simplex frequencies, is it not?
I think it has a few of them in there, but it's kind of generic. You don't get a whole lot, just because there's so many people standards. It's FCC approved for business and ham radio use, so it's hard to kind of put anything in there, just assuming what customer is going to buy it, how they're going to use it. Most people that buy a radio like this, whether ham or business, they're going to tailor it specific to what their needs are. And so there's building a generic code plug doesn't really make sense all the time, if it's a dual use kind of radio.
So this is, I assume, because it's a TYT, that we could pair it up with, now when I'm saying pairing it, I'm not talking about Bluetooth pairing it. I'm talking about we can say, throw an MD-9600 in there or something, and then it should talk with that just fine, and maybe the older MD-380s and things like that. It'll work. It's going to be compatible with the other MD series radios, pretty much.
If you steer away from the AES 256, yes, it is. Now, when you start dabbling in the 256, and then what you run into is that extra encryption really garbles everything up. I've tried it, and it doesn't work very well.
But for someone who's just looking for a digital radio and they just want to say, not the 256 encryption aside, overall, if you're going to pair a mobile radio with this, you need a mobile solution and you need this out in the field as well. An MD-9600 will probably work just fine with this.
Yeah, mine does.
Yeah, so you're using both. Also, both of those radios are Part 90 type accepted for business use. So that makes a nice little combination for businesses overall.
Mm-hmm.
Now we get to the price, $119.99.
Yep.
$119.99 is what we have here. But overall, this is a pretty good radio, especially for the price. I think $119. I remember when they first started coming out with a lot of these digital models, they were pretty expensive, and they were especially very, very pricey for the business users, and some of them still are, as far as business digital radios are concerned. And the prices come down somewhat in recent years, but that's one of the things that TYT did that really changed the game for DMR, and they started out with the MD-380, is they brought that price down significantly. Mm-hmm. This one right here, the UV390 dual bander, IP67, AES 256 encryption, all these bells and whistles with it, $119.99. I'd say that's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, I've tested this radio against some pretty well-known radios. Everybody said they want to know how well does it receive, how well does it transmit, and I keep probably 4 or 5 radios, handhelds in my car as I drive to work and back, and listen to local repeaters. I'm pretty impressed that this one it's pretty on par for most of the other well-known brands.